Kuhn Review, print speaking to the blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the National Podcast, recorded at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @KuhnReview, that is @ CUEANDREVIEW. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@kuhnreview.com. That is INFORMATION @CUEANDREVIEW.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
From The National, Friday the 5th of September 2025, from the news section. Brewdog records £37 million loss in 2024 as sales slump. Article written by Lucy Jackson. Scottish drinks firm Brewdog recorded a £37 million loss last year, according to an update sent to the company's shareholders. The troubled beer firm, which recently had its beers axed from 2,000 pubs across the UK, saw annual debt repayments rise to £17 million, while its sales growth slumped to just 1%. It comes after The National exclusively revealed the firm's co-founder, Martin Dickie, stepped down from his role out of the blue last month. Brewdog's other co-founder, James Watt, quit as chief executive last year after 17 years in the role. The latest figures were revealed in an update sent to Brewdog's shareholders on Thursday afternoon. While pre-tax losses narrowed from £59 million last year to £36.6 million, Brewdog still fell £34.5 million into the red after tax. The firm's largest shareholder, a private equity investor called TSG Consumer Partners, has also agreed to lend it a further £20 million on top of high-interest loans that the brewer took out in 2022 and 2023 on an interest rate of up to 18%. The increase in debt helped push up Brewdog's annual interest payments by £4 million to £17.3 million. In its statement, Brewdog played down the significance of stalling revenues and persistent pre-tax losses, The Guardian reports. Instead, bosses pointed to its preferred adjusted profit before factors such as interest payments and tax, saying this earnings figure of £7.5 million showed the company had returned to profitability for the first time in several years. James Taylor, who took over from Watt as chief executive, said the company had achieved our highest ever share of the UK beer market, selling the equivalent of 4.5 cans of beer every second in UK supermarkets. Brewdog was founded by Watt and Dickie in Ellon, Aberdeenshire in 2007. It has 71 of its own pubs in the UK, 17 of which are in Scotland. Last month it was announced that Brewdog would close 10 bars across the UK, including its flagship Aberdeen pub as well as its Dundee pub. That article was written by Lucy Jackson and read to you by Elizabeth. From The National, Friday the 5th of September 2025, from the politics section. Firm Angela Rayner used to buy £800,000 flat denies giving tax advice. Article written by Steph Braun. Angela Rayner's political future is hanging in the balance after the conveyancing firm she used to complete her purchase of her £800,000 flat denied giving her tax advice. Joanna Verico, the head of a small, family-run firm in Kent, said on Thursday it had not provided any advice to the Deputy Prime Minister on how much stamp duty to pay. The firm said it completed her stamp duty return based only on information she provided. Rayner underpaid stamp duty on the property in Hove by as much as £40,000, but she alleged she was given incorrect legal advice that she did not need to pay the higher stamp duty rate reserved for second home purchases. An independent ethics probe into the Deputy Prime Minister's tax affairs is expected to report back ahead of the weekend on whether she broke the ministerial standards rules. Verico and Associates said on Thursday that its lawyers never gave Rayner tax advice and were being made scapegoats. Verico said, "We're not qualified to give advice on trust and tax matters, and we advise clients to seek expert advice on these." Keir Starmer repeatedly declined to say whether he would sack his deputy, who is also the Housing Secretary, if his independent ethics watchdog rules against her. The Prime Minister said he would, of course, act on the findings of Laurie Magnus's probe following Rayner's acknowledgement that she failed to pay the £40,000 tax surcharge. Rayner's colleagues in government have lined up to defend her record, with Trade Minister and Scottish MP Douglas Alexander on Friday morning telling Times Radio she was in politics for the right reasons. Alexander also urged patience ahead of the conclusions of the investigation, telling BBC Breakfast, "I would just ask your viewers to think, what would they want in their circumstances, in their workplace? Of course there need to be procedures. There's frustration while that process is underway, but I think everyone is entitled to due process, and that's the process that's underway, but listen, I get it." The advice she received is likely to form a key plank of the investigation. Sources close to Rayner said a conveyancer and 2 experts in trust law had all suggested the amount of stamp duty she paid on the East Essex property was correct, and she acted on the advice she was given at the time. Rayner said she had initially been advised that she was not liable for the second property surcharge because she had sold her stake in her family home in Ashton-under-Lyne to a court-instructed trust established in 2020 to benefit her disabled son. But she conceded she had made a mistake after fresh legal advice from a leading tax counsel later revealed that she was liable for the extra duty on her new Hoe flat. Before then, she had insisted for weeks that she had paid the correct amount of tax. The Independent's ethics advisor will assess whether Rayner broke the ministerial rules, which place an overarching duty on ministers to comply with the law, behave in a way that upholds the highest standards of propriety, and be as open as possible with the public. Starmer told the BBC he would act on whatever the report is that's put in front of me. That article was written by Steph Braun and read to you by Elizabeth. From The National, Friday the 5th of September 2025, from the news section. Inquiry into sex noises phone planted in Commons. Article written by Lucy Jackson. An inquiry has been launched after a mobile phone was reportedly planted to play sex noises during Prime Minister's questions. The device was discovered in the House of Commons during a routine sweep of the chamber on Wednesday. The Metropolitan Police said they believed it was purposely placed there to disrupt proceedings in the House. According to The Times, the phone had been hidden near the front bench to play a sexually explicit audio recording in the middle of Prime Minister's questions. It was discovered before it could go off. There was no clear footage of the device being planted, the paper reported. An investigation has been launched. It is understood that the incident is being treated seriously, as it represents a breach of parliamentary security. A Met Police spokesperson said, "On Wednesday 3rd September, a mobile phone was found during a routine search of the House of Commons chamber by Met officers. Inquiries have led officers to believe that the phone was purposely placed in a location with the aim of causing disruption to business in the House. An investigation has been launched and inquiries are ongoing. We have updated the Speaker and Clerk of the House." A UK Parliament spokesperson said, "Parliament is a public building and we facilitate the visits of thousands of people to the estate each week. The safety and security of everyone who works or visits here remains our top priority, and we have robust and proactive security measures in place. This includes ensuring that visitors and their belongings are security screened, along with monitoring and routine searches of areas that are open to the public. While we cannot comment on the detail of our processes, we can confirm that a mobile phone was removed from the Commons chamber on the 3rd of September, demonstrating the effectiveness of the security measures we have in operation." That article was written by Lucy Jackson and read to you by Elizabeth. From The National, Friday the 5th of September 2025, from the Politics section. Former Tory Minister Nadine Dorries defects to Reform UK. Article written by Xander Elliotts. Former Tory Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries has defected to Reform UK. A fierce ally of former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, Dorries said she had switched to Nigel Farage's party because the Tories cannot win the next election. It removes election-winning prime ministers and replaces them with duds, she added. Writing for the Daily Mail, Dorries claimed it had taken her an agonising 12 months to decide to defect following 30 years as a Tory. She wrote, "It was shortly after the last election that I was discussing the catastrophic failure of the Conservatives with a former party donor. If only the Conservative Party had behaved more like Conservatives when we were in power, we wouldn't be in this mess," he told me despairingly. The penny dropped. I realised at that moment that my political principles have never altered. My core beliefs are the same today as they were the day I joined the Conservatives back in 1995. It was the Conservative Party that had changed, not me. She went on, "I know how an effective government can work when ministers are united behind core beliefs and objectives. But I've seen the other side too, how personal ambition, avarice, ego, hubris can corrupt. It's time for change. Yes, it's time to make Britain great again, to remember who we once were, what those who gave their lives in the Second World War fought for, and to remember why a government is elected, to keep us safe and for the nation to prosper. Only Nigel gets this. I know this may not be universally popular with all members of Reform, but I do believe there will need to be an accommodation on the right of the political spectrum at a future election. Jeremy Corbyn's yet-to-be-named new party will unite with the Greens, the pro-Gaza independents and the extreme left to split the Labour vote. If the vote on the right is also split, it may pave the way for a left-wing government even more extreme than the one we have now. And when that happens, to paraphrase a memorable headline, will the last person to leave the country please turn the lights off, if indeed we still have electricity? Dorries' defection comes after another former Johnson minister, Andrea Jenkyns, also defected to Reform UK. Jenkyns, who made headlines after giving protesters outside Downing Street the middle finger in 2022, is now the Reform Mayor of Greater Lincolnshire. In Scotland, MSP Graham Simpson has also jumped ship to Farage's party. That article was written by Xander Elliotts and read to you by Elizabeth. From The National, Friday the 5th of September 2025, from the Culture section. Exclusive. Probe ends into Australian influencer incident at historic Jacobite site. Article written by James Walker. An investigation by Historic Environment Scotland, HES, has come to an end after a video showing a pair of Australian influencers climbing on a historic Jacobite site went viral. Brothers Stefan and Lachlan Lamble raised over £50,000 for Cancer Research UK by running the length of the UK, from John O'Groats to Land's End. With their mullet hairstyles, an in-your-face, on-camera style, and what appears to be a preference for Union Jack shorts, the pair, collectively known as Lambros, have amassed a huge social media following in the UK and worldwide. But one video during their challenge drew the ire of some in Scotland last month, with the brothers sharing a video filmed at Ruthven Barracks, a site of huge historical importance. Situated near Badenoch in the Highlands, it is the best preserved of the 4 barracks built in 1719 after the 1715 Jacobite Rising. The brothers could be seen climbing and running on the barracks, as well as throwing stones off of it. One unimpressed Scot took to Reddit to post the video, which appears to have since been taken down, with the headline, "Australian influencers damaging historic Jacobite-era monument for clicks and likes." Reddit users also widely commented their disapproval on the post on Reddit. A spokesperson for Historic Environment Scotland, HES, subsequently told The National that they were made aware of the incident and launched an investigation. "While we appreciate their wider fundraising activities for a good cause, Our historic sites should be treated respectfully and engaged with safely, they said at the time. This is to avoid irreparable damage to the site themselves, whether deliberate or accidental, and to avoid endangering the safety and enjoyment of others. Now the probe has ended, with HES telling the National that, since the monument is scheduled, it was reviewed as an unauthorised works case, and that a review had found no visible damage. In this instance, the team have visited the site and the incident does not appear to have resulted in any physical damage to the monument, a spokesperson said. That article was written by James Walker and read to you by Elizabeth. From The National, Friday the 5th of September 2025, from the news section. Scotland first in UK to screen babies for devastating rare condition. Article written by Lucy Jackson. Scotland is to become the first part of the UK to routinely screen newborn babies for a medical condition that can have devastating impacts for both the infants and their families. Health Secretary Neil Gray confirmed that from early 2026, newborns in Scotland will be screened for spinal muscular atrophy, SMA. The debilitating genetic condition causes damage to the motor nerves in the spinal cord, leading to progressive muscle degeneration and disability. Sufferers have muscle weakness, movement problems, and difficulty breathing, and can also have swallowing, tremors, and spinal curves. It affects an average of 3 to 4 babies a year in Scotland, and about 70 infants a year across the UK. From next year, a 2-year pilot, funded by the Scottish Government and pharmaceutical company Novartis, will see infants born in Scotland screened for the condition as part of the existing blood spot test done when babies are just 5 days old. It is hoped this work will be able to gather evidence on the effectiveness of testing. Giles Lomax, chief executive of the charity SMA UK, hailed the introduction of testing in Scotland as a hugely positive step forward, saying that testing babies at a few days old would allow them to be treated before they start to develop symptoms of the condition. Lomax said, "We are absolutely delighted to hear the news that the NHS Scotland will be adding SMA to their newborn screening programme in an evaluative and research capacity, with the aim of the first baby being tested early 2026. He added, "With clinical pathways already established and disease-modifying treatments approved, this means those babies born will be treated pre-symptomatically and can therefore, in many cases, follow normal developmental pathways." Lomax said that the data gathered over the 2-year period would contribute to a wider UK evaluation and could ultimately help towards a recommendation for SMA to be added to the blood spot testing programme permanently. He stated, "This is a hugely positive step forward, with Scotland joining other countries around the world who already screen for SMA." Meanwhile, the Health Secretary said that SMA can have devastating impacts for babies and their families. Gray stated, "This investment demonstrates our commitment to early detection through our screening programme. I would like to thank SMA UK and all the campaigners across Scotland who have worked so hard to highlight this issue, as well as Novartis for their funding." He continued, "By detecting SMA before symptoms develop, screening could allow earlier treatment, which could lead to much better life outcomes. This investment will contribute towards building the case for making this test permanent and help secure the best possible care and support for babies and families." Novartis UK and Ireland Chief Medical Officer Rob Hastings, meanwhile, said the introduction of testing was a landmark decision for families in Scotland, offering hope and an opportunity for early detection and access to care for children born with SMA. He added, "We welcome this progress and continue to support efforts to expand newborn screening across the UK to ensure every child has the opportunity to be screened and treated for this rare and devastating condition." Dr. Sarah Smith, consultant clinical scientist and director of the Scottish Newborn Screening Laboratory on the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital campus in Glasgow, where the tests will be analysed, said that the important screening evaluation would benefit babies and their families across Scotland by allowing babies with this condition to access treatment where it is appropriate more quickly, leading to better outcomes. Dr. Smith said, We welcome these plans for SMA to be evaluated as part of our screening programme, allowing for evidence to be gathered on the test's effectiveness. That article was written by Lucy Jackson and read to you by Elizabeth.
From The National, Friday the 29th of August 2025, from the comment section. 10 things we can do in Scotland to stop anti-refugee sentiment. By Sabir Zazai, CEO of Scottish Refugee Council. Over the last few weeks, we have seen an escalation of anti-refugee protests taking place across parts of the country. The slogans continue to be loud, the anger palpable. But beneath the placards and headlines lies a deeper question. What kind of society do we wish to be? In moments like these, it is tempting to respond with equal force, to meet hostility with outrage, but we must resist that impulse. Instead, we must call for calm, for clarity, and above all, for compassion. We must remember that people are at the heart of this. People like us, with families, friends and children. Refugees and individuals who have fled war, persecution and unimaginable hardship in search of safety. To live in fear is not a choice, it is a condition forced upon them. And when we allow fear to shape our response, we do not become safer, we become smaller. I see this not only as someone who works alongside refugees every day, but as someone who has lived that journey. I have seen what conflict does to communities, how it fractures trust, uproots lives and leaves deep scars that won't heal for generations. But I have also seen what peaceful coexistence can build. Resilience, renewal, and a shared sense of belonging. These are not abstract ideals, they are lived truths. This is not only about refugees, it is about who we are, about the kind of society we wish to build for future generations. Let us not be defined by the loudest voices of division, but by the quiet courage of those who choose empathy over enmity. Our cohesion is a delicate, fragile flower. It is our shared responsibility to nurture and preserve it. If we are sincere about building a society rooted in dignity, justice and compassion, then we must move beyond reactive outrage and towards solutions that could work for all of us. Here are the steps we can take together to turn the tide. 1. Challenge misinformation swiftly and publicly. All key institutions, including local authorities, police and community leaders, must respond to false claims with facts and not silence. Delay allows lies to fester. Rather than inflame divisions, our political leaders have a duty to bring people together. 2. Reclaim the narrative. We must tell the true stories of refugees, amplifying voices that help to humanise, not demonise. People seeking sanctuary aren't a problem that needs to be solved. It is a system that needs fixing. 3. Reform the asylum system. A broken system does not help anyone. Long delays in asylum decisions, accommodation away from the warmth of community, and the lack of right for people to work creates conditions for scapegoating of people with deep scars of trauma. We need timely and just decisions and to allow people the right to work. 4. Strengthen legal protection. We need robust laws to protect the safety of individuals and communities from targeted harassment and incitement. Where there have been incidences of hate speech and intimidation outside asylum hotels, these must be met with legal consequences. 5. Invest in community dialogue. When people don't talk to one another, it allows a vacuum to be filled by misconceptions and misinformation. Polarisation thrives in silence. Councils should host regular forums where people could come together to get to know one another and learn about mutual concerns. 6. Hold media accountable. Misleading coverage fuels divisions. Regulators must enforce standards and we must call out dehumanising language. But equally, we must celebrate responsible reporting like we do at SRC through our annual media awards. 7. Build coalitions of solidarity. Faith groups, Private sector, schools and civic organisations must stand together. Counter-protests aren't good enough. We need longer-term strategy to safeguard our cohesion. 8. Celebrate local leadership. Councils that speak out, like Falkirk in Perth and Kinross, deserve recognition. Their courage sets a precedence, and must spotlight leaders who choose compassion over convenience. 9. Speak with moral clarity. This isn't an issue of capacity or policy, it is one of morality. We must name racism, reject scapegoating, and affirm that seeking asylum is a legal right. 10. Get back to basics. We must honour, protect, and respect basic human rights. No one is less worthy than anyone else. We all deserve safety. Safety is not built on exclusion, it is built on connection, and the more we see each other and engage in meaningful dialogue, the safer we all become. That was a comment piece written by Sabir Zazai, CEO of the Scottish Refugee Council, and read by me, Ian McKenna. From The National, Friday the 29th of August 2025, from the comment section. Behind the headlines, Nigel Farage at number 10 would cripple journalism. Why do media back him? By Xander Eliards. We had the dubious pleasure of welcoming Nigel Farage to Scotland this week, where he delivered his second day running of headline-grabbing press conferences. His visit to Edinburgh, as the press were told, it later transpired they meant Broxburn, saw him announce another defection from the flagging Scottish Tories. But it was the previous day that had seen him, backed by giant Union flags, pledged to tear up the rights that journalists, and the rest of us, used to challenge those in power. It was no empty threat. If past form and present promises are any guide, a Farage premiership would see the UK's press freedom stripped away as quickly as the Brexit Party veneer. Reform UK are already undermining the free press with the limited capacity they have in power in councils in England. In Nottinghamshire, the party's council leader has banned the Nottingham Post, its online edition, and a team of BBC-funded local democracy reporters in its stable from interacting with the local administration. That is more than a Trumpian echo. It is a copy-paste policy. The US president, steamrolling opposing views in a way that would make Putin proud, banned the Associated Press from White House briefings after it refused to start calling the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. Petty and shambolic, yes, but also very, very dangerous. For clues as to whether the UK media would face a similar fate under a Farage premiership, we can look at the man's actions and his frequent proclamations that copying Trump is a good idea. In June, when Farage visited Scotland, it was only a matter of hours before he was suggesting that journalists were involved in a far-reaching conspiracy to organise and then report on protests against him. Such fabrications spread like wildfire through the hyper-online, far-right Twitter space, where they are treated as gospel truth. If Farage was Prime Minister, how long would it be before he took issue with some newspaper or broadcaster or other and banned them from number 10 briefings? How many months or weeks before it was only Reform's chosen press getting access to government? Aside from his and his underlings' actions, this is what Farage is pledging to do. Drag the UK out of the European Convention on Human Rights and a host of other international treaties and agreements, and rip up the UK Human Rights Act which embedded it into British law. The ECHR is not just words on a page. It provides a legal framework upon which much of the UK's journalistic output relies. The Daily Mail, the reform-supporting paper who breathlessly backed ditching the ECHR earlier this week, know this. In fact, they often use Article 10 of the ECHR, which guarantees a right to freedom of expression for their own ends. Just last year, the Daily Mail's publisher won a high-profile case against having to pay the success fees of the people they defame by relying on Article 10. But the day after Farage said a reform government would strip these protections away, the Daily Mail ran the front page headline, "Finally, a politician who gets it." That is not news, of course. It is the opinion of an editorial team who are all too happy to see human rights stripped away from those they deem lesser than themselves. But human rights are universal. To support the removal is to take the chainsaw to a branch on which you sit. Will the blowhards running the UK press wake up and fight for their rights? Even if that means fighting for other people's as well? I would not hold your breath. That was a comment piece written by Xander Elliards. From the National, Friday the 29th of August 2025, from the comment section. What I learned from talking to anti-refugee protesters in Falkirk, by Pinar Aksu. It has been very unsettling to witness what we are all experiencing as a society in the past few weeks. The constant hate being shared across the social media platforms should be a warning for all of us. I have attended many protests and gatherings in my life, from anti-racism marches, showing solidarity to different causes, to trade union protests, asking for better working conditions. However, the protest I attended outside the hotel accommodation for people seeking asylum and refuge in Falkirk was different. These protests are organised under the name of concerned citizens, worried locals and peaceful protest. To weaponise one vulnerable group in society to attack others is hateful. There was nothing local nor peaceful about these people. They were brought there from all over the country, including far-right organised groups who did Nazi salutes and death threats. There was even a banner that said, "Kill them all, let God sort them out." I want to remind that the people who are staying in the hotel accommodations are human beings. They have families, friends, they have lives. They have a right to seek asylum and refuge, just as we have the right to adequate housing, better working conditions, the right to education and more. For years now, we have been campaigning to highlight the threat of the far right as they mobilise in communities, spreading their lies. So much anger and hate, using austerity, poverty, the housing crisis and blaming immigrants rather than the political system. Nowadays, some of these people come in suits. They are political representatives. We need to remember, refugees did not underfund or close public services. Refugees did not remove benefits from disabled people. Refugees did not stop creating more social housing for all. I tried to create a conversation corner, inviting people to come and talk to me, listen and learn. I spoke with a group of young people, possibly around 14 to 15 years old. They were confused about what was happening and the aggression displayed by these so-called peaceful protesters. They said, "Why are they placed in hotels? But I've seen TikTok videos of them... Are they all illegal? How long will they stay? I heard they get £100 per week." Reality, people seeking asylum and refuge are banned from working. We spoke for a while, and I appreciated this. As educator Paulo Freire said, true dialogue cannot exist unless the dialoguers engage in critical thinking. I have also seen young children shouting, holding banners saying we want our country back, Scotland first, protect our kids, stop the boats. Since the 2020 Parkland tragedy, we have been calling to end hotel detention. The system kills people. Now, the far right is creating its own system where the communities can cause serious harm. Not all people were far right. Some were confused, some are being influenced by these myths. But this is how it starts. Fear, division, hate. We are better than this. Let's remember we are all citizens. We are all human beings. People just want to have a normal life like you or I. And that was a comment piece written by Pinar Aksu and read by Ian McKenna.
From The National, Tuesday the 9th of September 2025, from the Politics section. Lib Dems launch campaign against BBC's wall-to-wall reform coverage. Article written by Steph Braun. The BBC has been accused of following Nigel Farage around like a lost puppy by the Lib Dems. The party has written to Ofcom to complain about wall-to-wall coverage of the Reform UK leader as part of a campaign it calls Balance the BBC. The letter cites the broadcaster's substantive efforts to carry reform voices on most prominent news programmes. The party has opened a petition demanding that the BBC be forced to commit to proportional coverage of political parties year-round and not just during election periods. Max Wilkinson, the party's culture and media spokesperson, has written to Ofcom director Melanie Dawes to highlight the BBC compounding the rise of a dangerous populism that threatens the fabric of our country. The BBC is following Farage around like a lost puppy, and the resulting wall-to-wall coverage is giving legitimacy to a man who wants to do to Britain what Trump is doing to America, Wilkinson said. The only way to counter Farage's hateful and divisive politics is with fair and representative journalism that makes space for more decent voices, and for that we need a balanced BBC. The letter says, by paying such disproportionate attention to Nigel Farage's latest outfit, Reform UK, the BBC is compromising its reputation. To many licence fee payers, the broadcaster gives the impression that hangs on every word uttered by Nigel Farage, despite his party's scant representation in Parliament. Wilkinson said the coverage of his party has been disproportionately low, despite it representing 18 times as many constituencies as Reform. And this discrepancy does real damage to the BBC's reputation. Ofcom guidance says eligible broadcasters must not give undue prominence to the views and opinions of particular persons or bodies on matters of political or industrial controversy and matters relating to current public policy in all the programmes included in any service taken as a whole. Section 6 of the Ofcom guidance applies during election and referendum periods and reads, due weight must be given to the coverage of parties and independent candidates during the election period. In determining the appropriate level of coverage to be given to parties and independent candidates, broadcasters must take into account evidence of past electoral support and/or current support. Broadcasters must also consider giving appropriate coverage to parties and independent candidates with significant views and perspectives. The Lib Dems are proposing to apply Section 6 throughout the year so that political parties are accorded due weight in non-electoral cycles, as well as election campaigns. This change would aim to limit the disproportionate coverage of Reform UK currently apportioned by the BBC, the party says. The BBC and Ofcom have been approached for comment by The National. And that article was written by Steph Braun. From The National, Tuesday the 9th of September 2025, from the news section. Man dies after group of people take unwell in Glasgow. Article written by Lucy Jackson. A man has died and another is in hospital after a group of people took unwell in Glasgow city centre. Police officers cordoned off Cambridge Street at Cowcaddens at around 8:10 p.m. on Monday, following reports of a number of people taking unwell. A 52-year-old man was pronounced dead at the scene, while a 37-year-old man was taken to hospital where his condition is described as stable. A 32-year-old woman and a 52-year-old man were treated by ambulance staff. Officers remained on the scene until Tuesday morning, and the streets has now reopened. It is understood the incident is treated as drug-related. Inquiries into the incident are ongoing, but police said there are not believed to be any suspicious circumstances. A Police Scotland spokesperson said, around 8:10 p.m. on Monday, September 8th, 2025, officers were called to a report of a group of people having taken unwell on Cambridge Street, Glasgow. Emergency services attended and a 52-year-old man was pronounced dead at the scene. His next of kin is aware. A 37-year-old man was taken to hospital where he remains in a stable condition. A 38-year-old woman and a 52-year-old man were treated by ambulance staff at the scene. Inquiries are ongoing to establish the full circumstances, but there are not believed to be any suspicious circumstances. And that article was written by Lucy Jackson. From The National, Tuesday the 9th of September 2025, from the news section. Network Rail launch £6.4 million intensive safety operation. Article written by Alistair Ferguson. Network Rail has said it is preparing for one of its most intensive seasonal operations, as it plans to carry out more than £6 million worth of safety precautions ahead of autumn. The railway operator announced on Tuesday that over the next 10 weeks, a £6.4 million programme of autumn treatment will be rolled out across Scotland's railway to help minimise disruption to services. Leaves on the railway are the equivalent of black ice on roads, a spokesperson for Network Rail explained. They added that although leaves may seem harmless, when they land on damp rails and are compressed by train wheels, the heat and weight bake them into a thin, slippery layer that can affect braking and acceleration. Specialist leaf-busting trains, RHTTs, and multi-purpose vehicles, MPVs, will be used to tackle any build-up across the country's railways, along with the help of high-pressure water jets that will clean the rails, and sand used to improve traction. Around 155 tonnes, around 12,000 bags, of sand are expected to be used throughout the season. In total, nearly 400 circuits of treatment will be carried out, covering 82,000 miles, with railway staff working more than 25,000 hours to keep the network safe and reliable, the train line operator said. Key routes in central Scotland, Fife and the Highland Main Line will have more frequent bursts of activity to keep trains running smoothly. Ross Moran, route director at Network Rail, Scotland, said the operation is a huge logistical effort involving specialist staff, trains and technology. He said, people might not realise just how challenging autumn can be for the railway, but it's a season that demands serious levels of preparation and action. Our teams across Scotland have been planning this operation for months. It's a huge logistical effort involving a specialist staff, trains and technology, all working together to keep passengers moving safely. We know how vital reliability is throughout the year, and even more so as we head into the darker, colder months. That's why this work is so important. It aims to strengthen the resilience of the network, reduce delays, and help trains operate safely and efficiently, whatever the season. Network Rail said it uses specialist weather forecasters to monitor conditions closely throughout the season, which helps to pinpoint where treatment is needed most and ensure resources are deployed efficiently and effectively. The rail firm also said it is working closely with ScotRail to ensure that autumn preparations are aligned across the network, with only minor timetable changes to ensure as few customers are affected. Network Rail added that there will be minor alterations to a very small number of services, and that the majority of routes will continue on the same schedule. Mark Ilderton, ScotRail Service Delivery Director, said, "We understand how frustrating it can be when trains are delayed due to leaves on the line. It might sound minor, but the impact can ripple across the entire network. That's why, this autumn, we're making a few small adjustments to our timetable to help keep services running smoothly, whatever the weather." Behind the scenes, our teams have been working tirelessly to get trains and stations ready for the seasonal change. And throughout autumn, we'll make sure customers have the latest and most accurate travel information to help you plan with confidence. During the summer, targeted vegetation management projects have also been carried out across Scotland to reduce the risk of obstructions and improve visibility. And that article was written by Alistair Ferguson.
This is from The National on Tuesday, the 9th of September 2025, from the comments section. Reform's Thomas Kerr doesn't understand the soul of the city he serves. This article is by Steph Payton. As a Glaswegian, I wouldn't say I was happy to see Glasgow City Councillor Thomas Kerr defect from the Conservatives to Reform UK at the beginning of the year. It feels almost alien, a party with no real support in the city, slipping into the chamber unwanted. Whether or not Reform could ever scrounge up enough support organically to snare a seat in the city chambers at an actual election remains to be seen. But for the shiny-eyed believers, Reform's faltering support in Scotland has done little to challenge the belief that the far right's ascent to power is unstoppable. When the National challenged the BBC over its decision to include Kerr on Question Time at St Andrews in June, despite Reform having precisely 0 elected representatives in Scotland, the former Tory councillor snatched up a copy of the newspaper and struck a pose. "I now identify as the Reform Man," Kerr posted, referencing the front page headline, "BBC called out over Question Time slot for Reform Man." Marvel film to follow, he concluded, contentedly unaware that Reform Man was probably a headline shortcut used for someone with absolutely no name recognition at all, out with a tiny political bubble. After 2 months, it's still Kerr's pinned post on ex-Twitter. Kerr faces the same problem as Reform colleagues south of the border. The party promised the moon while rocket scientists are in short supply. But where once there was only the rhetoric of the coming storm, now we have the reality of what Reform UK governance looks like. And it looks a lot like James Walker-Gurley, a senior cabinet member for Reform at Nottinghamshire County Council. When interviewed by a journalist recently, Walker-Gurley giggled while admitting that he didn't know why local infrastructure needed to be improved, before casting his eyes downward to monotonously read a prepared answer from a sheet of paper. Or Barry Martin in Staffordshire, who asked his constituents if he should resign as their local Reform councillor after attending one meeting that was more boring than expected. "Barry doesn't do dull and boring, as you know," he posted on Facebook, referring to himself in the third person. It must have been quite the shock to be confronted with the slow and technical pace of local politics when you were expecting a Nuremberg rally, because it's much easier to sing from Nigel Farage's hymn sheet than it is to do the actual thankless work of a local councillor. There is a crisis of competence and empathy in British politics that Reform cannot answer. Like all far-right movements, it views both as a threat to itself. And if Reform can't build support through actually improving local services, all they have left is the propaganda. I don't know what other word to use for Kerr's comments about Kenmure Street at the weekend. 4 years ago, hundreds of protesters blocked an immigration van in the south side of Glasgow to stop a dawn raid and to oppose the Home Office. For 8 hours we filled the street and then we won. The men in the back of the police van were released and we marched with them to a safe location. When people talk about Kenmure Street now, it's in the same weighted tones as they mention the Glasgow Girls and the city's long history of opposing dawn raids and protecting our neighbours. It was a moment, a victory, a symbol. And yet, Kerr believes the Kenmure Street protest would not happen now, just a few short years after the fact. Speaking on the BBC's Sunday show, Kerr claimed that Reform's immigration policies would not face the same level of opposition in Scotland as they would have previously, on account of the so-called popularity of Reform's agenda. Which really leaves me wondering, as I do on a daily basis at this point, whether Kerr and his colleagues are truly so dense that they've no idea what's happening in the city around them, or if they're just lying, selling the propaganda and the myth. Because it must be one or the other. Nobody who knows Glasgow's soul would think for a moment that Reform's agenda will not be fought endlessly in the city should England elect a far-right government and force it onto Scotland. Much has been said of Reform's accelerated rise to stardom, but the British press has been as reticent to give the same narrative to another phenomenon which is happening across the UK. A real, informed and ready-to-fight left-wing movement that is building in intensity. To look at the thousands of people regularly risking arrest to protest the UK government's disgusting role in the genocide of Palestinians. The marching anti-racist protesters who hounded a UKIP march off the streets of Glasgow just a month ago. Even the first Your Party branch meeting in Scotland that had queues out the door for seating. To look at this and more and publicly conclude that the path to victory is clear for the far right is truly the position of a complete idiot. There is a tension below the surface of Western politics that's ready to break. It can be heard in the anger of recent protests. It can be seen in the assassination of a chief executive of a US health insurance giant. And it will be felt by any politician who thinks they can take our rights and our neighbours without resistance. And that article was written by Steph Payton and read by Lynn McNeil. This is from The National on Tuesday the 9th of September 2025 from the Culture section. Scottish bottler releases rare 20-year-old whisky from Lost Distillery. This article is by Laura Pollock. An independent Scottish bottler has announced the launch of its oldest release to date and first ever single grain Scotch whisky, distilled at a Lost Distillery. Saltire Rare Malt has released a 20-year-old single grain distilled at the Lost Distillery, Port Dundas, finished in a virgin Japanese Mizunara oak butt, one of the rarest and most expensive oaks in the world. Port Dundas was the largest distillery in Scotland, founded in 1811 and closed in 2011. The limited edition release of 558 bottles forms part of the company's Lost Distillery series, a tribute to Scotland's whisky landmarks from the past and the enduring legacy of rare casks left behind. Bottled at 59.7 ABV, the bottling is being marketed as a true collector's piece and a connoisseur's dream. Saltire Rare Malt, which was founded in 2024, are working with Hans and Becky Offringa, known internationally as the Whisky Couple, to curate the collection. For the Port Dundas 20-year-old limited edition release, whisky lovers can expect a vibrant and complex profile. Red fruit, cedarwood, waffles and maple syrup, warm leather, writes the Whisky Couple. A nice, full and complex dram. A vintage convertible with leather upholstery and a wooden dashboard, basking in the sun with its passengers enjoying a sweet treat. Commenting on their oldest release to date, Saltire Rare Malt founder and director Keith Rennie said, "The spirit of Saltire Rare Malt is defined by patience, precision and care. Every cask is meticulously nurtured and only released when it has reached perfection. This latest release is a milestone, our oldest, rarest single grain finished in the extraordinary Mizunara oak. It's both a celebration of the artistry of whisky making and a tribute to the heritage of Scotland's lost distilleries, a piece of history for collectors and enthusiasts to treasure." Saltire Rare Malt was founded in 2024 in Falkland. And that article was written by Laura Pollock and read by Lynn McNeil.
The National News on Wednesday the 10th of September. Hotel protest group denies patriotic alternative links despite speeches. An exclusive article written by Laura Pollock. The group responsible for anti-asylum seeker protests in Falkirk has denied having links to a neo-Nazi group, despite them speaking at events repeatedly. Patriotic Alternative member Richard Macfarlane was again given a platform to speak at a gathering arranged by Save Our Future and Our Kids' Futures this past weekend, despite anger over his calling to keep Britain white at an event outside the town's Claddon Hotel in August. Save Our Future and Our Kids' Futures has said that they were aware of Mr Macfarlane's speech, as well as his using of leaflets and banners, but went on to distance themselves from him, stating that these were not organised, approved or endorsed by our group. However, in a statement to The National, the group gave no indication of action to be taken, despite previously stating that speakers would be vetted prior to events, and reiterated their position on bringing national flags or banners, adding, "We do not welcome or promote any other agenda." We are aware that individuals, including Richard Macfarlane, have attended our protests with their own banners, leaflets and messages, they said. These were not organised, approved or endorsed by our group. We've been very clear. If people attend our events under our banner, they should only bring national flags or banners relevant to the issues at hand. We do not welcome or promote any other agenda. Our movement exists for one purpose only, to demand answers and accountability regarding the use of the Claddon Hotel, the crimes that have occurred there, and the lack of transparency from the government, the Home Office and from Falkirk Council. That is where our focus lies, and we will not allow our message to be hijacked or misrepresented. They added, "We are a local grassroots community campaign, not a political organisation, not funded by unions and not affiliated to any far-right or extremist group. Attempts to brand us otherwise are an insult to the many families, workers and concerned residents who attend our events peacefully and in good faith." Protesters were also seen holding Patriotic Alternative issued leaflets, and a banner was photographed belonging to Mr Macfarlane, which displayed the so-called 14 words slogan coined by American neo-Nazi David Lane. The group's name itself echoes the slogan, "We must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children." When questioned over the origins of the group's name, they said, "We strongly reject any attempt to associate our group with extremist organisations or far-right ideology. Our name, Save Our Future and Our Kids' Futures, was chosen by ordinary local residents to reflect exactly what it says, a community standing up for the safety, security and well-being of families here in Falkirk. Any suggestion that it has its origin in or links to neo-Nazi slogans from the United States is both misleading and offensive." In response to the statement, a spokesperson for Stand Up to Racism Scotland said, "It's simply not credible for Save Our Future and Our Kids' Futures to deny links to the far right, when from the very beginning they've worked hand in hand with extremist organisers. They've repeatedly given a platform to Richard Macfarlane, a leading figure in Patriotic Alternative, a white supremacist hate organisation. These men are not local residents, but were invited in to promote their agenda." Members of the group also travelled to Epping in Essex last weekend to show support. The visit came while Mr Macfarlane spoke at a protest in Falkirk for the second time on Sunday. With their banner, members of the group were photographed with Epping Hotel protest organiser Callum Barker, who has in turn been pictured with members of the far-right Homeland Party, which formed as a result of a split from Patriotic Alternative. An exclusive article written by Laura Pollock. The National News on Wednesday the 10th of September. John Swinney hails constructive talks with President Trump on removing tariffs on Scotch whisky. An article written by Abby Garton-Crosby. John Swinney and Donald Trump had a constructive discussion about removing tariffs from Scotch whisky last night, the First Minister has said. Mr Swinney is currently in Washington, D.C., where he's aiming to convince the US President to roll back the 10% tariff on Scottish whisky. The First Minister joined Mr Trump in the Oval Office after meeting representatives of the whisky industry. It's understood that the meeting lasted around 30 minutes. In a video posted on social media, Mr Swinney, with the Washington Monument in the background, said, "I wanted to share an update on my visit to Washington, D.C. I spent the morning with representatives of the whisky industry from Scotland and also from the United States, and we discussed the 0 for 0 approach on tariffs, which would help the industry to flourish on both sides of the pond. I've now taken those arguments to the Oval Office, to President Trump, and we've had a constructive discussion about the reasons why Scotch whisky would benefit from no tariffs. It's all part of my job to make sure that Scotland's interests are promoted at all times, and that's what I'll always do as First Minister. Whether President Trump will remove the 10% tax on Scotch whisky imported into the United States has not yet been established. An article written by Abby Garton-Crosby. The National Politics on Wednesday the 10th of September. Sir Keir Starmer to meet the Israeli president, Number 10 confirms. A front-page article written by Abby Garton-Crosby and Lucy Jackson. Sir Keir Starmer will meet Isaac Herzog during the Israeli president's visit to London, Downing Street confirmed yesterday. President Herzog is expected to arrive in London today and will meet with the Prime Minister and other politicians during his visit. Number 10 said that the meeting will go ahead following Israel's strike targeting Hamas leaders in Qatar yesterday. Meanwhile, a campaign group is seeking an arrest warrant to detain President Herzog when he enters the UK. The Scottish Greens said that he should be arrested upon arrival. Mr Starmer's official spokesman said, "The Prime Minister will be meeting the Israeli President, where he'll raise the intolerable situation in Gaza, the action that Israel must take to end the horrific suffering we're witnessing. It cannot go on any longer." The spokesman said that Mr Starmer shares revulsion at the suffering in Gaza, but stopped short of repeating a call by Health Secretary Wes Streeting for Mr Herzog to answer for alleged war crimes and ethnic cleansing. The Prime Minister would raise the situation with President Herzog as part of our ongoing diplomatic efforts to bring the suffering to an end and to bring about the peace that both Israelis and Palestinians want to see, the spokesman added. Scottish Greens MSP Patrick Harvie said, "We should not be rolling out the red carpet for a man who was photographed proudly writing messages on bombs or suggesting that newborn babies are terrorists." Statements made by Isaac Herzog fan the flames of hatred and division, inciting violence and destruction of an entire nation. That in itself is a war crime, and any ethical and responsible government would treat it as its duty to arrest him and investigate his role in the assault on Gaza. Amnesty International said that the visit must not provide diplomatic cover for a state committing genocide, while the Palestinian Return Centre condemned the visit being allowed to go ahead. Meanwhile, pro-Palestine campaign group Friends of Al-Aqsa has instructed a legal team to apply for an arrest warrant to be issued for President Herzog, Middle East Eye reported. It's understood that the warrant relates to charges of aiding, abetting or procuring direct and indiscriminate attacks on civilians and civilian objects. Friends of Al-Aqsa chair Ismail Patel said, "Britain has failed to defend and champion the rule of law. There is now an opportunity to correct the failings and issue an arrest warrant to investigate President Herzog's incitement to attacks on Gaza. We have submitted an application to compel UK law enforcement to arrest Isaac Herzog upon entry into the United Kingdom. Every official, no matter how senior, must be held accountable for attacks on civilians. There can be no immunity for such grave crimes." Mr Patel went on to say that any British MP meeting Mr Herzog will be endorsing Israel's gross human rights violations and crimes against humanity. He added, Keir Starmer inviting Mr Herzog shows not only complicity but direct support for the genocide in Gaza. Mr Herzog has previously asserted that all Palestinians in Gaza were unequivocally responsible for the Hamas attack on the 7th of October in 2023. The entire Palestinian nation out there that is responsible. It's not true, this rhetoric about civilians not aware and not involved, Mr Herzog said in October 2023, in comments that were later cited by the International Court of Justice in its genocide ruling. Unlike the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Mr Herzog is not subject to an international arrest warrant. Sasha Dechmuk, Amnesty International UK's chief executive, said that while Mr Herzog's position is largely ceremonial, he has used it to defend collective punishment. Those dehumanising words were cited by the International Court of Justice as evidence of the risk of genocide in Gaza, he said. Such language has helped to legitimise mass killing of civilians, including children, and the large-scale destruction of homes, hospitals and schools. The Palestinian Return Centre said in a statement ahead of President Herzog's visit, "Such a reception provides political and diplomatic cover for war crimes and crimes against humanity, whilst at the same time granting legitimacy to a policy of extermination that has been explicitly warned against by the highest international judicial bodies." A front-page article written by Abby Garton-Crosby and Lucy Jackson. The National Politics on Wednesday the 10th of September. The Health Secretary is engaging with Westminster to resolve issues with the MSP's assisted dying bill. An article written by Catherine Bussey. A formal request will be made to the UK Government to take the necessary steps to resolve issues over the legislative competency of proposed assisted dying laws for Scotland, the Health Secretary confirmed yesterday. Neil Gray said that he's been engaging with Westminster and developing proposals which will be put to the UK Government as a formal request. It comes as parts of the Assisted Dying for Terminally Ill Adults Scotland Bill lie outside devolved powers. In a letter to Holyrood's Health Committee, Mr Gray said that parts of the bill concerning the approved substance a terminally ill person would take to end their life and the regulation of health professionals are areas where power is reserved to Westminster. He said that his letter to the UK Government seeks its views on the steps that they might be willing to take to try to resolve these competence issues. He added that both governments are mindful of the challenging timescales that we're working to, ahead of next year's Holyrood election in May. The bill, which has been brought forward by Lib Dem MSP Liam MacArthur, passed its first vote in the Scottish Parliament, but still faces further scrutiny by Holyrood's Health Committee and a final vote by MSPs before it can become law. The Scottish Government is taking a neutral stance on the legislation, with MSPs from all parties being given a free vote on the matter. Mr MacArthur welcomed the confirmation from Mr Gray that both the UK and the Scottish governments were working together to make sure that a truly comprehensive, safe and compassionate assisted dying law can operate in Scotland. He added, at the outset of this process, the presiding officer certified that the Scottish Parliament has the powers to pass the bill, but I've always been clear that some additional measures would be required to be put in place in order for the law to work as intended. As the Scottish Parliament has passed the general principles of my bill, this joint work to put those measures in place is certainly timely as we now increase our focus on safe and successful implementation. A UK government spokesperson said, "We can confirm that we have received a devolution request from the Scottish Government in relation to the MacArthur Bill. This is a complex area and we will give the request due consideration." An article written by Catherine Bussey. The National News on Wednesday the 10th of September. Rogue Surgeon Inquiry to hold its first public session. An article written by Lucy Garcia. A group of patients harmed by a former neurosurgeon in NHS Tayside said that it's about time the public inquiry surrounding his actions took place, as it prepares to hold its first public preliminary hearing today. The Patients Action Group, which represents people operated on by Sam El-Jamal, spoke out ahead of the session in Edinburgh. Alan Ogilvie, a former patient operated on by Mr El-Jamal in 1995 and a spokesperson for the group, said, "For the dozens of patients who have fought tirelessly for years, this hearing is a significant, if profoundly delayed, milestone. We've waited 2 years since the inquiry was first announced, and even longer since we were first harmed, for this process to finally begin in public. While we welcome this step, the immense emotional and physical toll of these delays on patients and their families cannot be understated. It is, quite simply, about time." Mr El-Jamal was head of neurosurgery at Dundee's Ninewells Hospital from 1995 until his suspension in December 2013. He's thought to have harmed dozens of patients and left some with life-changing injuries. The inquiry will investigate his appointment to various professional positions that he held between 1995 and 2014. It will also look at when concerns were raised about his practices and how those concerns were responded to by NHS Tayside. It will investigate whether important information about Mr El-Jamal's professional practice was concealed, either by him or by NHS Tayside, and the actions taken by the Health Board and other relevant organisations. It will also look at whether the systems that they had in place were adequate to protect patients. The inquiry was announced in 2023 after a campaign by the Patients Action Group. The group has acknowledged Inquiry Chairman Lord Weir's assurance that he intends to seek evidence from UK-wide regulatory bodies such as the General Medical Council and the Health and Safety Executive. However, it has concerns over the inquiry's legal terms of reference, which prevent it from making binding recommendations about these organisations. The inquiry can make recommendations as to how systems or practices could be improved to protect NHS patients and promote their safety in the future. Mr Ogilvie continued, "We welcome Lord Weir's commitment to seek evidence, but an invitation is not a summons. Seeking evidence is not the same as compelling it. Without the legal power to force these bodies to be fully accountable and to make official recommendations about their conduct, we are left with a critical weakness at the heart of this public inquiry. Patients need a guarantee of full scrutiny, not just an assurance of good intention. We continue to urge the Scottish Government to amend the terms of reference to give this public inquiry the teeth it needs to get to the whole truth." Mr Ogilvie went on, "For years, patients were repeatedly referred by their trusted GPs, who acted as the gatekeepers to specialist care. The public inquiry must not shy away from examining the failures in primary care. Was due diligence done? Were red flags missed? This is not about blaming individuals, but about understanding the entire broken system, from the local surgery right through to the regulatory bodies. The flawed and delayed independent clinical review process directly impacts the public inquiry's ability to gather evidence. Patients have described the clinical reviews as a one-way communication exercise, a process that does not feel like a genuine review designed to help them, but another bureaucratic hurdle. If this primary source of information cannot command the trust of patients, then the public inquiry is building on a weak foundation. We look to Lord Weir to address these concerns directly. We're here to participate meaningfully, but we will not be silent until we have a comprehensive, fearless and transparent investigation." NHS Tayside said that it's actively participating in the El-Jamal inquiry. An article written by Lucy Garcia. The National News on Wednesday the 10th of September. Scottish Government is urged to scrap first-class travel on ScotRail. An article written by Steph Braun. Ministers are being urged to end first-class travel on ScotRail services, with most seats regularly left empty. The Greens are calling for the Scottish Government to remove first-class ticketing on commuter services following research last year that showed that only 2% of the seats allocated were being used. Mark Ruskell, the party's transport spokesperson, said first-class travel is a dated idea which is leaving commuters having to squeeze onto busy trains. He said, "Our railways are for all of us, but we've all had the experience of having to stand in a packed carriage when the first-class one is completely empty. Anyone who's got on a busy commuter train from Glasgow to Edinburgh during the festivals in August knows how uncomfortable this can be, especially in the heat, which can lead to people becoming unwell. If 98% of first-class seats are not even being used, then what is the point in them?" The call will be made as part of a Scottish Government debate on 20 years of Scotland's railway providing a strong platform for the future, which takes place later today in the Holyrood Chamber. Mr Ruskell has put in an amendment calling for the further expansion of new rail stations and the removal of first-class ticketing on commuter services. Peak fares were abolished on Scotland's railway last week, with the price of a return ticket between Glasgow and Edinburgh dropping from £32.60 during peak times to £16.80. The First Minister, John Swinney, said that the change would help those struggling with a soaring cost of living. The Scottish Government announced the move earlier this year, after previously refusing to do so following a year-long pilot, citing a lack of uptake. Mr Ruskell said that having first-class carriages makes little sense following the abolition of peak fares. He said, "It makes no sense to divide up our trains that way, especially when we're scrapping peak fares and trying to get more people onto them. Rail should be about the need to travel rather than the ability to pay for what are often very expensive tickets. It's at odds with a ScotRail that is run for everyone, and it means less seats and busier carriages for the rest of us." An article written by Steph Braun. The National Politics on Wednesday the 10th of September. The SNP is to force a vote on scrapping the two-child benefit cap. An article written by Gregor Young. The SNP is set to force a vote on scrapping the two-child benefit cap, putting further pressure on Sir Keir Starmer's government. Labour has faced calls to scrap the limit since the party came to power last year, including from charities, backbenchers and former party leaders Gordon Brown and Neil Kinnock. The SNP's Kirsty Blackman will raise the issue through a 10-minute rule motion in the Commons on Tuesday the 16th of September, before MPs rise for recess. Ms Blackman, the party's work and pension spokesperson, said, "It's shameful that under Keir Starmer, child poverty is soaring in the UK and the Labour Party is refusing to help hard-pressed families. That's why the SNP has tabled a bill to scrap the two-child benefit cap across the UK for good. Voters were promised that things would get better, but under the Labour government the UK has gone from bad to worse. Energy bills, food prices and the cost of living are all rising, and many families are struggling to keep their heads above water." She added, "There can be no more excuses for failing to act. Keir Starmer must follow the SNP's lead and scrap the two-child benefit cap for good, or the Labour Party will consign thousands more children into poverty and damage their life chances." In addition to scrapping the cap, the SNP is calling on the UK government to abolish the bedroom tax and match the Scottish Child Payment UK-wide by raising the child and family elements of universal credit by £27.15 per child per week. The SNP, backed by the Green Party, Plaid Cymru and independent MPs, previously forced a vote on the child benefit cap during the King's speech last year. The push was defeated, with 7 Labour MPs, including former Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell, having the whip suspended from the party after backing the SNP-led amendment. The two-child cap was first announced in 2015 by the Conservatives and came into effect in 2017. It restricts child tax credit and universal credit to the first 2 children in most households. The cap has long been criticised by Labour figures as a driver of child poverty. Research by the House of Commons Library and commissioned by the SNP showed that over the past decade, the number of children living in poverty in the UK has risen from 3.7 million, that's 27%, in 2013-2014, to 4.5 million, that's 31%, in 2023-2024. An article written by Gregor Young. The National News on Wednesday the 10th of September. A woman is jailed for embezzling £28,000 from a school. An article written by Gregor Young. A primary school worker who abused her position to embezzle more than £28,000 of school funds has been jailed. Jane Duncan, who was an administrative officer at Millowmains Primary in Dundee, used the money to finance her own lifestyle, buying PlayStation games, beauty products, supermarket goods and homewares. The 54-year-old carried out the crime between 2016 and 2019, misusing money from a government procurement card to make her own purchases. More than £14,000 of what she stole had been set aside for school trips paid for by parents. Ms Duncan ran the school office and had responsibility for banking incoming money to pay for the trips. The Scottish Government's Pupil Equity Fund money is used to top up these funds for pupils unable to pay in full. Her scheme was uncovered in 2019 when a Dundee City Council accountant noticed that the school had not recorded finances for its breakfast clubs. A subsequent investigation found that almost £14,000 of parents' contributions towards 2 school trips was unaccounted for. One of these was for a residential trip to Arjonig on Loch Tay, and the other was for a visit to Dalgais Outdoor Centre in Perthshire. At Dundee Sheriff Court yesterday, Ms Duncan was jailed for 16 months, having earlier pled guilty to a single charge of embezzlement. Helen Nisbet, the Procurator Fiscal for Tayside, said, Jane Duncan used her position to help herself to cash paid by parents and then used public funds intended to support children who come from disadvantaged backgrounds to cover her tracks. She abused her position to use their money for her own benefit. Let the public be assured that we take such financial criminality extremely seriously. Those who commit this type of offending will be dealt with robustly by the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service. An article written by Gregor Young.
This is from The National on Thursday 11th September 2025. From the Sport section. Green Brigade Celtic protest option versus Kilmarnock emerges. By Ewan Payton. Celtic fans are being urged to show their feelings towards the club's board by joining supporters groups in a protest during the club's trip to Rugby Park this weekend. Brendan Rodgers' men will make the short journey down the M77 on Sunday afternoon to face Kilmarnock. Celtic Supporters Association chaired a meeting alongside the Green Brigade, the Celtic Trust and other influential groups on Wednesday night as they discussed ideas to seek change at boardroom level. Supporters are furious with Peter Lawwell and co following the club's lack of transfer activity during the window, which was in part to blame for Celtic's failure to qualify for the Champions League, despite boasting around £60 million in the bank. One of the protest options that has emerged from the meeting is a call to arms for Celtic fans to boycott the first 10 minutes of Sunday's game at Killie. The suggestion involves supporters only entering the Chadwick stand after the 10th minute of the Scottish Premiership clash, in a bid to show the discontent at the current goings-on at Celtic. It's said that a statement is incoming from the various parties involved in discussions which will urge fans to take part. It is expected the Green Brigade will display banners over the empty seats to convey their messaging until supporters enter the away stand, with the game set to be broadcast by Sky Sports. The results of a fan survey with almost 40,000 responses were also revealed last night. The vast majority, around 99%, have called for the removal of the current board members and have also advocated for the potential boycott of the club's upcoming Europa League fixtures. That article was by Ewan Payton. This is from The National on Thursday 11th September 2025. From the Sport section. Nico Raskin holds talks with Rangers boss Russell Martin. By Ewan Payton. Nicholas Raskin will return to Rangers' first team training this week, according to a report. The Belgian international is back in Glasgow after being away on international duty with his country. He scored his first national team goal in their 6-0 thumping of Kazakhstan. Prior to the international break, Russell Martin left Raskin out of the matchday squad for the drab 0-0 encounter with Celtic. That came after a fallout which led to the midfielder, aged 24, training alone. Now the Scottish Sun say the midfielder has held talks with Martin about the situation. As a result, he will return to first-team training at Auchenhowie. However, they claim Raskin is aware he will have to earn his spot in the team. Rangers take on Hearts in their next Scottish Premiership game. The match will be played at Ibrox at 3 p.m. Raskin is keen to put the summer turmoil behind him and focus on his club football now. "I'm going to do my best to turn it around," he told media in Belgium. "I know I can be important for my club. I have a good relationship with the fans. My situation at the club is complicated. I'll try and sort it out, but it's not just up to me. I absolutely love Rangers. I try to give it my all. Do I want a transfer in the coming weeks? No, that is not the intention. I want to regain my place in the team. It's not an easy situation." That article was by Ewan Payton.
That concludes this week's edition of the National Podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels at Cocoon Review and to tell your friends about our service.